Hello there and welcome. Tonight we're going to explore one of nature's most mysterious and fascinating organisms, mushrooms. These peculiar life forms have captivated humans for thousands of years, and as we'll discover together, they're far stranger and more important than most people realize. From the forests beneath our feet to the food on our plates, mushrooms are everywhere, quietly shaping our world in ways we're only beginning to understand. Now, before we begin, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I'm doing here. Also, leave in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is there. It's great to see how these videos connect people from around the world. Now get comfortable and let's begin. Let's start with something that might surprise you right away. Mushrooms aren't plants. Despite spending their lives rooted in soil and often growing near trees, mushrooms belong to an entirely different kingdom of life called fungi. This means they're actually more closely related to animals than they are to plants, sharing a common ancestor with us that lived over 1 billion years ago. It's a strange thought, isn't it? That a mushroom has more in common with you than it does with the tree it grows beside. When we talk about mushrooms, we're really only seeing a small part of the story. The mushroom itself, the part that pops up above ground, is just the fruiting body of a much larger organism. Think of it like an apple on a tree. The real fungus lives underground or inside rotting wood, forming a massive network of thread-like structures called mycelium. These threads can spread for miles, creating some of the largest organisms on Earth. In fact, the largest known living organism on the planet is a fungus. Located in Oregon's Blue Mountains, this honey fungus covers over 2,300 acres and is estimated to be thousands of years old. Mushrooms reproduce through spores rather than seeds. A single mushroom can release billions, sometimes even trillions, of spores into the air. These microscopic particles drift on the wind, settling wherever they land in hopes of finding the right conditions to grow. Have you ever wondered why mushrooms often appear overnight after rain? It's because the mycelium network has been growing underground for weeks or months, and when conditions are finally right, usually after rainfall, the fruiting bodies shoot up with remarkable speed. The speed at which mushrooms grow is genuinely impressive. Some species can grow several inches in just a few hours. The stinkhorn mushroom, for instance, can grow up to 6 inches in a single hour. This rapid growth is possible because the cells are essentially preformed in the underground mycelium, and when the mushroom emerges, it's mostly just inflating those cells with water. Now, there are far more species of mushrooms than most people realize. Scientists have identified about 14,000 species of mushrooms so far, but they estimate that there could be as many as 5 million species of fungi in total, meaning we've only discovered a tiny fraction of what's out there. These species come in an astounding variety of shapes, sizes, and colors, from the classic toadstool shape we all recognize to shelf-like brackets, delicate corals, jelly-like blobs, and even perfect spheres. Speaking of colors, mushrooms display nearly every color imaginable. There are bright red fly agarics, deep purple amethyst deceivers, vibrant orange chicken of the woods, electric blue mycena, pure white destroying angels, and jet black devil's tooth. Some mushrooms even glow in the dark. Bioluminescent mushrooms, like the ghost mushroom, produce a soft green glow through a chemical reaction similar to fireflies. Imagine walking through a forest at night and seeing these ethereal lights dotting the forest floor. The shapes mushrooms take are equally diverse and often quite strange. The octopus stinkhorn looks exactly like something from an alien planet, with bright red tentacles spreading out from a central body. The bird's nest fungus creates perfect little cups that contain egg-like structures filled with spores. The dead man's fingers fungus looks disturbingly like decomposing digits reaching up from the soil, and the bleeding tooth fungus oozes bright red droplets that look remarkably like blood. But let's talk about what mushrooms actually do in nature, because this is where things get really interesting. Mushrooms are decomposers, nature's recyclers. They break down dead organic matter, releasing nutrients back into the soil. Without fungi, dead trees, leaves, and animals would just pile up indefinitely. Fungi produce enzymes that can break down some of the toughest organic materials on Earth, including lignin, the tough compound that makes wood woody. This decomposition role makes fungi absolutely essential to every ecosystem on the planet. Many mushrooms form partnerships with living plants in a relationship called mycorrhizae. The fungal mycelium connects with plant roots, and they exchange resources. The fungus receives sugars that the plant produces through photosynthesis, while the plant gets water and nutrients that the fungus's extensive network can gather from a much larger area than roots alone could reach. It's estimated that about 90% of all plant species form these partnerships with fungi. In other words, most plants couldn't survive without their fungal partners. These mycorrhizal networks are sometimes called the wood wide web because they connect multiple plants together. Trees in a forest aren't isolated individuals, but are linked through underground fungal networks. Through these connections, trees can actually share resources with each other. A large established tree might send sugars through the network to smaller saplings that aren't getting enough sunlight. Mother trees have been observed supporting their offspring through these fungal highways. The network can even carry warning signals. When one plant is attacked by insects, it can send chemical signals through the mycelial network, warning neighbouring plants to boost their defences. Have you ever noticed that mushrooms often grow in circles? These formations are called fairy rings, and they've fascinated humans for centuries. Medieval Europeans believed they were dancing grounds for fairies, hence the name. In reality, fairy rings form because the mycelium grows outward from a central point in all directions at roughly the same rate, creating a circular pattern. As the centre of the colony exhausts the nutrients in the soil, only the outer edge produces mushrooms, creating a ring that expands year after year. Some fairy rings are hundreds of years old and can be enormous, with the largest ever recorded measuring over 1/2 mile in diameter. Mushrooms have been used as food for thousands of years. Archaeological evidence suggests humans have been eating mushrooms since prehistoric times. Today, we cultivate dozens of species for food, with button mushrooms, cremini, and portobello mushrooms being the most common. But here's something interesting. Those 3 different mushrooms are actually all the same species at different stages of maturity. Button mushrooms are harvested young, cremini are allowed to mature a bit longer, and portobellos are fully mature. The global mushroom industry is massive, worth billions of dollars. China produces more than 70% of the world's cultivated mushrooms. Shiitake mushrooms, native to East Asia, are the second most commonly cultivated mushroom in the world after button mushrooms. They've been cultivated in China and Japan for over 1,000 years. But not all mushrooms are safe to eat, of course. Some are among the most poisonous organisms on Earth. The death cap mushroom, Amanita phalloides, is responsible for more than 90% of mushroom poisoning deaths worldwide. Just half a cap can be lethal to an adult human. The terrifying thing about death cap poisoning is that symptoms don't appear for 6 to 24 hours after ingestion, by which time the toxins have already done irreversible damage to the liver and kidneys. The destroying angel is another deadly mushroom, pure white and innocent looking, but containing the same deadly amatoxins as the death cap. These toxins work by disrupting RNA synthesis in cells, essentially shutting down the body's ability to produce the proteins it needs to function. There's no antidote for amatoxin poisoning. Treatment involves supportive care and sometimes liver transplant. Other poisonous mushrooms have different effects. The Floya agaric, with its iconic red cap and white spots, contains muscimol and ibotenic acid, which cause hallucinations, confusion, and sometimes coma. It's rarely fatal to adults but has caused deaths in children and pets. Interestingly, this mushroom has been used in shamanic practices for thousands of years, particularly by indigenous peoples of Siberia. Some mushrooms are poisonous in stranger ways. The angel wing mushroom was considered edible for decades until people in Japan started dying after eating it. It turns out the mushroom is only poisonous to people with kidney problems, accumulating toxins that healthy kidneys would normally filter out. The alcohol inky cap is safe to eat unless you drink alcohol within a few days of consuming it, in which case it causes severe illness. The mushroom contains a compound that interferes with alcohol metabolism, causing rapid heart rate, flushing, nausea, and vomiting. Then there are mushrooms that won't kill you, but will make you wish you were dead. The aptly named Sikana causes severe gastrointestinal distress. The funeral bell causes similar symptoms plus liver damage. And eating the Satan's bullet results in such violent vomiting and diarrhea that you'll certainly remember its name. Given these dangers, you might wonder why anyone risks foraging for wild mushrooms at all. The answer is that many edible species are delicious and can't be easily cultivated. Chanterelles, morels, porcini, and truffles are prized by chefs and food enthusiasts worldwide. A single pound of high-quality truffles can sell for thousands of dollars. These mushrooms form such specific mycorrhizal relationships with particular trees that commercial cultivation remains extremely difficult or impossible. Foragers learn to identify edible species with certainty, never taking chances with unknown mushrooms. There's an old saying among mushroom hunters: there are old mushroom hunters and bold mushroom hunters, but there are no old, bold mushroom hunters. The risk of misidentification is simply too high. Many poisonous mushrooms have edible lookalikes, and some poisonous species can vary in appearance depending on age and environmental conditions. Beyond food and poison, mushrooms have been used medicinally for thousands of years. Traditional Chinese medicine employs dozens of mushroom species. The reishi mushroom has been used for over 2,000 years and is still used today as a health supplement. Modern research has found that it does indeed contain compounds with potential immune-boosting and anti-inflammatory properties, though more research is needed to confirm many traditional claims. The turkey tail mushroom has been studied extensively for its potential cancer-fighting properties. It contains polysaccharides that appear to boost immune function, and clinical trials in Asia have shown promising results when used alongside conventional cancer treatments. It's been approved as an adjunct cancer therapy in Japan for decades. The lion's mane mushroom is being studied for its potential effects on brain health. Research in both animals and humans suggests it may stimulate the growth of brain cells and could potentially help with cognitive decline and nerve damage. The compounds in lion's mane appear to stimulate the production of nerve growth factor, a protein crucial for maintaining and organizing neurons. Cordyceps mushrooms are parasites that grow on insects, and they've been used in traditional Tibetan and Chinese medicine for centuries. They were essentially unknown in the West until Chinese athletes credited cordyceps supplements with their success at the 1993 World Championships. Since then, they've been studied for potential effects on energy, stamina, and oxygen utilization. Wild cordyceps are incredibly rare and expensive, but cultivated varieties are now widely available. Perhaps the most famous medicinal mushroom discovery came by accident in 1928, when Alexander Fleming noticed that a mold called Penicillium had contaminated one of his bacterial cultures and killed the bacteria around it. This led to the development of penicillin, the first true antibiotic, which has saved countless millions of lives. While Penicillium is a mold rather than a mushroom, it's still a fungus, demonstrating the pharmaceutical potential of the fungal kingdom. In fact, many modern medications are derived from fungi, cholesterol-lowering statin drugs were originally discovered in fungi. Cyclosporine, which makes organ transplants possible by suppressing immune rejection, comes from a fungus. Researchers continue to search for new medicines in fungi, as these organisms produce a vast array of bioactive compounds. Some mushrooms have mind-altering properties that have been used in spiritual and ceremonial contexts for thousands of years. Psilocybin mushrooms, often called magic mushrooms, contain the compound psilocybin, which converts to psilocin in the body and produces hallucinogenic effects. Archaeological evidence suggests these mushrooms have been used in religious ceremonies in Mexico and Central America for over 3,000 years. Recent medical research has shown that psilocybin may be remarkably effective in treating depression, anxiety, PTSD, and addiction when used in controlled therapeutic settings. Clinical trials have found that a single supervised session with psilocybin can produce significant, long-lasting improvements in people with treatment-resistant depression. This has led to a renaissance in psychedelic research after decades of prohibition, with several countries and US states reconsidering their legal status. Mushrooms have also inspired human technology in surprising ways. The mycelium network's efficient distribution of nutrients has influenced the design of computer networks and transportation systems. Japanese railway engineers used slime mold, a fungus-like organism, to optimize the layout of the Tokyo rail system. When food sources representing different Tokyo stations were placed on a map, the slime mold created a network remarkably similar to the existing railway, but with improvements in efficiency and resilience to damage. Fungi are now being used to create sustainable materials. Mycelium can be grown in molds to create packaging materials that are completely biodegradable and compostable. Companies are producing mycelium-based leather alternatives, building insulation, and even furniture. The mycelium is grown on agricultural waste like corn stalks or sawdust, essentially turning garbage into useful products. Some researchers are exploring fungi's ability to break down plastics and other pollutants. Certain fungi can digest petroleum products, plastics, and even toxic heavy metals. This raises the possibility of using fungi to clean up contaminated sites, a process called mycoremediation. Some species can even break down cigarette butts, which are one of the most common and persistent forms of litter worldwide. Fungi's decomposition abilities extend to some truly tough materials. Some fungi can break down nerve agents and chemical weapons. Others can digest explosives like TNT. There are even fungi that can survive in the radioactive environment inside the damaged Chernobyl nuclear reactor, where they appear to be using the radiation as an energy source through a process called radiosynthesis, similar to how plants use light in photosynthesis. The diversity of environments where fungi thrive is remarkable. They've been found in every habitat on Earth, from the deepest ocean trenches to high in the atmosphere, from desert soils to Arctic ice. Some fungi thrive in acid mine drainage with pH levels that would dissolve human skin. Others grow in jet fuel tanks, clogging fuel lines in aircraft. There are fungi that live only in the digestive systems of herbivores, helping break down plant material. One group of fungi, the endophytes, lives inside plants without causing disease, and sometimes provides benefits like pest resistance or drought tolerance. Scientists are just beginning to understand these relationships and their potential applications in agriculture. Some endophytic fungi produce natural pesticides that protect their host plants. Others help plants survive in harsh conditions by producing compounds that improve stress tolerance. Have you ever wondered about mushrooms in extreme conditions? Some fungi produce antifreeze proteins that allow them to survive freezing temperatures. Others create spores that can survive boiling water, vacuum conditions, and even the radiation of outer space. Scientists have found that fungal spores can survive on the exterior of the International Space Station, raising interesting questions about the possibility of life spreading between planets. The fossil record shows that fungi are ancient organisms. The oldest fungal fossils are about 800 million years old, though molecular evidence suggests fungi may have existed on land even earlier. Fungi were among the first organisms to colonize land, appearing before plants. In fact, the colonization of land by plants was likely only possible because of their partnerships with fungi. The first land plants didn't have proper roots and relied entirely on mycorrhizal fungi to obtain water and nutrients. There's evidence that fungi may have played a role in one of Earth's major extinction events. About 250 million years ago, at the end of the Permian period, volcanic eruptions released massive amounts of carbon dioxide, causing rapid global warming. This environmental stress, combined with fungi decomposing dying forests, may have created a feedback loop that made the extinction worse, wiping out over 90% of marine species and 70% of terrestrial vertebrate species. But fungi have also helped shape the world in positive ways. The coal deposits we rely on today were formed during the Carboniferous period, about 300 million years ago, when vast forests grew but hadn't evolved the compounds that modern trees have. More importantly, the fungi that could break down lignin hadn't evolved yet. Dead trees accumulated for millions of years, eventually forming coal. Once lignin-degrading fungi evolved, this process stopped, which is why we don't have coal forming in the same way today. The relationship between fungi and insects is particularly fascinating. Some fungi are parasites that infect and kill insects in truly horrifying ways. The cordyceps fungi mentioned earlier don't just grow on insects, they take control of the insect's behavior. When a cordyceps spore infects an ant, the fungus grows through the ant's body, eventually taking over its nervous system. The fungus compels the ant to climb to a high point with good humidity and temperature, bite down onto a leaf or stem, and die. The fungus then grows a fruiting body out of the ant's head to spread its spores. This isn't science fiction, it's real, and it's been documented in numerous species. Different cordyceps species specialize in different insects, and each species manipulates its host's behavior in specific ways optimized for the fungus's reproduction. Researchers have found that these fungi produce compounds that hijack the host's muscles, controlling them like puppet strings while leaving the brain intact just enough to keep the basic body functions running. On the flip side, some insects have domesticated fungi. Leafcutter ants don't actually eat the leaves they harvest. Instead, they carry them back to their colony and use them to grow a specific species of fungus that they then eat. The ants have been cultivating these fungi for millions of years, and the fungi have become completely dependent on the ants, unable to survive in the wild. It's one of the most sophisticated examples of agriculture in the animal kingdom outside of humans. Similarly, termites in Africa and Asia cultivate fungi in massive underground gardens. The fungus breaks down the wood that termites eat, making the nutrients more accessible. Some termite colonies can be 30 feet tall and house millions of insects, all supported by fungal agriculture. The termites carefully maintain temperature and humidity in their fungal gardens, remove contaminating fungi, and have evolved specialized soldiers that secrete antifungal compounds to protect their cultivated species. Fungi have influenced human culture in countless ways throughout history. The ergot fungus, which grows on rye and other grains, produces compounds similar to LSD. Mass poisonings from contaminated grain throughout history caused hallucinations, convulsions, and gangrene. Some historians have suggested that ergot poisoning may have contributed to the Salem witch trials in 1692, as the symptoms match some of the bewitched behavior described in records. The discovery of mushrooms with psychoactive properties influenced many cultures' spiritual practices. The ancient Greeks used ergot-contaminated grain in the Eleusinian Mysteries, secret religious ceremonies where participants experienced powerful visions. Some scholars believe that the sacred drink soma, mentioned in ancient Hindu texts, was made from a psychoactive mushroom, possibly fly agaric. Mushrooms appear frequently in folklore and fairy tales. The idea that fairies live in or near mushrooms appears in stories across many European cultures. In Slavic folklore, mushrooms are considered magical, and people believed that thunderstorms caused mushrooms to grow, calling them children of thunder. In Japanese culture, some mushrooms are seen as symbols of longevity and good fortune. The iconic appearance of the red and white fly agaric mushroom has become deeply embedded in popular culture. It's the mushroom you see in Mario video games, the one depicted in countless children's books, and possibly the origin of some Christmas traditions. Some scholars have suggested that the modern image of Santa Claus, with his red and white outfit, chimney entry, and flying reindeer, may have roots in Siberian shamanic practices involving fly agaric mushrooms. Shamans would wear red and white clothing, enter homes through smoke holes in the roof to avoid snow-blocked doors, and the reindeer they herded were known to seek out and consume these mushrooms. In terms of size, mushrooms vary enormously. The smallest mushrooms are barely visible to the naked eye, while the largest can have caps several feet across. The largest mushroom cap ever reliably measured was over 39 inches in diameter. But remember, these fruiting bodies are tiny compared to the organism underground. That honey fungus in Oregon we mentioned earlier has a mycelium network that weighs an estimated 600 tons. Mushrooms can be incredibly resilient. Some species can survive being completely dried out and then spring back to life when moisture returns. Others can survive being frozen solid. The spores are even tougher, remaining viable for decades or even centuries under the right conditions. There are documented cases of mushroom spores germinating after 50 years of dormancy. The speed of spore release is remarkable. Some mushrooms can shoot spores out at incredible velocities. The hat thrower fungus launches its spores at accelerations of up to 180,000 Hz. That's 180,000 times the force of gravity. This makes it one of the fastest organisms on Earth in terms of acceleration. The spores are launched at over 55 miles per hour from a structure less than 1/10 of a millimeter across. Different mushrooms have evolved fascinating mechanisms for spore dispersal. Puffball mushrooms form spherical fruiting bodies that release clouds of spores when disturbed. A mature giant puffball can contain 7 trillion spores. The stinkhorn mushrooms we mentioned earlier produce a foul-smelling, slimy coating that attracts flies. The flies land on the mushroom, get covered in the slime containing spores, and carry them to new locations. The smell has been described as rotting flesh or dung, and some stinkhorns can be smelled from 50 feet away. Birds' nest fungi have evolved an elegant solution to spore dispersal. They create cup-shaped structures containing small egg-like packets of spores. When raindrops hit the cup at just the right angle, they splash out the eggs, which can travel several feet. The eggs are sticky and attached to grass or twigs, where grazing animals might eat them. The spores then pass through the animal's digestive system, unharmed, and are deposited in new locations with a convenient pile of fertilizer. The timing of mushroom emergence is precisely controlled by environmental factors. Most mushrooms need specific temperature ranges, moisture levels, and sometimes even particular light conditions to trigger fruiting. This is why mushroom hunters learn to read the forest, knowing when and where different species will appear. Morels, for instance, often fruit when soil temperatures reach about 50 degrees Fahrenheit, often when dogwood trees are blooming. Some mushrooms have annual fruiting cycles, so reliable you could set your calendar by them. Others are more opportunistic, appearing whenever conditions are right. A few rare species fruit only once every several years. The devil's cigar, found only in Texas and Japan, is one of the rarest mushrooms in the world and fruits irregularly. Climate change is affecting mushroom fruiting patterns. Studies in Europe have found that many species are fruiting earlier in the year than they did decades ago, and the overall fruiting season has become longer. Some species have become more common, while others have declined. Since fungi are so important to forest health, these changes could have cascading effects on entire ecosystems. The taste and texture of mushrooms vary as much as their appearance. Some mushrooms taste like seafood. The lobster mushroom supposedly has a flavour reminiscent of shellfish. Others taste like chicken, beef, or even maple syrup. The candy cap mushroom smells and tastes like maple syrup or butterscotch and is used in desserts. Some mushrooms have no flavour, but are prized for their texture, like the wood ear mushroom commonly used in Asian cuisine. Can mushrooms really taste like meat? Some do come remarkably close. The chicken of the woods tastes and has a texture similar to chicken breast when cooked. The beefsteak fungus looks like raw meat and has a tangy, meaty flavour. These mushrooms have become popular among vegetarians and vegans looking for meat alternatives. Their umami-rich flavour comes from high levels of glutamate, the same compound that makes meat taste savoury. The cultivation of mushrooms is more complex than growing plants. Since mushrooms can't photosynthesize, they need to be grown on a substrate that provides all their nutrients. Button mushrooms are typically grown on composted manure and straw. Shiitake mushrooms grow on logs or sawdust. Oyster mushrooms can grow on almost anything organic, including coffee grounds, straw, or even shredded paper. Some people are growing mushrooms at home using kits or simple setups. It's easier than you might think. Oyster mushrooms, in particular, are forgiving for beginners. They grow fast, tolerate a range of conditions, and can be cultivated on waste materials like used coffee grounds. Several companies collect used coffee grounds from cafes specifically to grow mushrooms, turning waste into food while reducing landfill burden. The process of mushroom cultivation involves several stages. First, spawn, mycelium growing on grain or sawdust, is introduced to the substrate. The mycelium colonizes the substrate over days or weeks, breaking down the organic matter. Once the substrate is fully colonized, conditions are changed to trigger fruiting. This usually involves adjusting temperature, humidity, light, and fresh air exchange. The mushrooms then grow rapidly and must be harvested at just the right time for optimal quality. Commercial mushroom farms are carefully controlled environments. They regulate every aspect of the growing conditions, from CO2 levels to light spectrum. Some facilities are completely automated, with robots harvesting mushrooms. The global mushroom cultivation industry produces millions of tons of mushrooms annually, and it's growing as mushrooms become more popular in Western diets. Mushrooms are nutritionally interesting. They're low in calories but high in several nutrients. They're one of the only non-animal food sources of vitamin D, which they produce when exposed to UV light, just as our skin does. Some commercial producers now expose their mushrooms to UV light specifically to boost vitamin D content. Mushrooms are also good sources of B vitamins, selenium, copper, and potassium. The protein content of mushrooms is notable, though not as high as meat or legumes. What's more interesting is that mushroom protein contains all the essential amino acids, making it a complete protein. They're also high in beta-glucans, a type of fibre that has been associated with improved immune function and cholesterol reduction. But perhaps one of the most exciting nutritional aspects is what mushrooms don't contain. They're naturally low in calories, fat-free, cholesterol-free, and very low in sodium. They can add substantial flavour and texture to dishes without adding many calories, making them valuable for people trying to maintain a healthy weight. Different species have different nutritional profiles. Shiitake mushrooms are particularly high in compounds that may boost immune function. Maitake mushrooms have been studied for potential blood sugar regulation properties. Crimini and portobello mushrooms are higher in antioxidants than white button mushrooms. The more mature and darker the mushroom, generally, the higher the antioxidant content. There's a whole field of study dedicated to fungi called mycology. Mycologists are scientists who study fungi, and their work spans everything from ecology to medicine to agriculture. It's a field that's still full of discoveries. Remember that we've only identified a tiny percentage of fungal species. Every year, scientists describe hundreds of new species, and molecular analysis keeps revealing that what we thought was one species is actually several. The tools mycologists use have advanced dramatically in recent decades. DNA sequencing has revolutionized how we understand fungal relationships and evolution. We've discovered that many traditional classifications based on appearance were wrong. Fungi that look similar may be only distantly related, while very different-looking fungi might be close relatives. This has led to major reorganizations of the fungal family tree. Mycologists have also developed better methods for cultivating fungi that were previously impossible to grow in laboratory conditions. This is opening up opportunities to study rare species and discover their potential applications. Some fungi that grow extremely slowly in nature can be coaxed into faster growth in the lab, making research more practical. Citizen scientists have become important contributors to mycology. Photography and GPS technology have made it easier for amateur naturalists to document mushroom sightings. Apps that help with mushroom identification have made it safer and more accessible for people to learn about local fungi. However, experts caution against relying solely on apps for determining edibility, as even good AI can make mistakes that could be fatal. Mushroom festivals and foraging groups have become popular in many parts of the world. These events celebrate local fungal diversity and often include guided walks, cooking demonstrations, and identification workshops. They help people connect with nature and appreciate the often overlooked kingdom of fungi. Some festivals attract thousands of visitors and are important events for local economies. The economic impact of fungi extends far beyond food. The global fungal biotechnology market, which includes everything from enzymes to pharmaceuticals, is worth billions of dollars. Fungi are used in the production of citric acid, which is added to countless food and beverage products. They're used to produce enzymes for everything from cheese making to biofuel production. They're even used in the production of some textiles and paper products. Fungi play a crucial role in the fermentation processes that give us bread, beer, wine, and sake. The yeasts that make these products possible are single-celled fungi. Without Saccharomyces cerevisiae, brewers' and bakers' yeast, human civilization would look very different. Bread and beer have been staples of human diet and culture for thousands of years. Some anthropologists have even suggested that the desire to reliably produce beer may have been a driving force in the development of agriculture. Different strains of yeast produce different flavors in fermented products. Brewers and bakers often cultivate specific yeast strains for particular products. Sourdough bread relies on wild yeasts captured from the environment. Some sourdough starters have been maintained for decades or even centuries, passed down through generations. The San Francisco sourdough flavor, for instance, comes partly from a specific strain of wild yeast found in that region. Cheese production often involves fungi as well. Blue cheeses get their distinctive appearance and flavor from Penicillium roqueforti. Brie and Camembert have their characteristic white rinds, thanks to Penicillium camemberti. Some aged cheeses develop complex flavors, partly through the action of fungi on their surfaces. Even cheeses that don't obviously involve fungi often rely on fungal enzymes in their production. Beyond food, fungi produce some remarkable compounds. The bright colours of many mushrooms come from unique pigments, some of which have been used as natural dyes. The wool industry has used fungal dyes for centuries. Recently, there's been renewed interest in natural dyes as alternatives to synthetic ones, and fungi are being explored as sustainable sources of colourful pigments. Some fungi produce antibacterial and antifungal compounds to defend themselves against competitors. These compounds are of great interest to pharmaceutical researchers. With antibiotic resistance becoming an increasingly serious problem, scientists are searching for new antimicrobial compounds, and fungi are promising sources. Several recently discovered fungal compounds show activity against antibiotic-resistant bacteria. The interaction between fungi and the immune system is complex and still being unraveled. Some fungal compounds appear to modulate immune function, potentially explaining traditional uses of medicinal mushrooms. Research has shown that compounds in turkey tail and other mushrooms can activate certain immune cells. However, the mechanisms are complex, and researchers caution against overstating the benefits until more research is done. Fungal infections in humans are usually minor, like athlete's foot or yeast infections, but they can be serious in people with compromised immune systems. Invasive fungal infections are a significant cause of death in hospitals, particularly for patients undergoing chemotherapy or organ transplant recipients. Some fungal infections are notoriously difficult to treat because fungi, being eukaryotes like us, are similar enough to our cells that drugs targeting them can harm us too. New fungal diseases are emerging as threats to wildlife and agriculture. White nose syndrome has killed millions of bats in North America. It's caused by a fungus that grows on bats' noses and wings during hibernation, disrupting their hibernation cycle and causing them to wake up and exhaust their energy reserves. The disease has spread rapidly across the continent and driven some bat populations to the brink of extinction. Chytrid fungus has caused catastrophic declines in amphibian populations worldwide. This aquatic fungus infects amphibian skin, which they use for respiration and water balance. It's caused the extinction of dozens of frog species and continues to spread. Scientists are racing to develop treatments and establish captive populations of affected species before they disappear forever. Plants face fungal threats too. Dutch elm disease, caused by a fungus spread by bark beetles, has killed millions of elm trees. Chestnut blight nearly wiped out the American chestnut, once one of the most important trees in eastern North American forests. Ash dieback is currently devastating ash trees across Europe. These diseases show how vulnerable ecosystems can be to introduced fungal pathogens. Agricultural crops are constantly threatened by fungal diseases. Wheat rust, corn smut, rice blast, potato blight, these and countless other fungal diseases cost billions in crop losses annually. The Irish potato famine of the 1840s, which killed over 1 million people, was caused by a fungus-like organism called late blight. Today, farmers use fungicides, resistant crop varieties, and careful management practices to control fungal diseases, but it's an ongoing battle as pathogens evolve to overcome our defences. Yet despite these threats, we can't live without fungi. They're essential decomposers, plant partners, food sources, and medicine producers. They've been our partners throughout human history, whether we realised it or not. As we learn more about fungi, we're finding new applications and developing a deeper appreciation for their role in nature. Looking to the future, fungi may help solve some of our biggest challenges. They could help us clean up pollution, produce sustainable materials, develop new medicines, and even feed a growing population. Researchers are exploring using fungi to produce protein for human consumption more efficiently than traditional livestock. Fungal protein could be grown on agricultural waste or even on carbon dioxide captured from the atmosphere, potentially creating carbon-negative food production. Some scientists are even exploring using fungi in space. Mycelium could potentially be grown into structures on Mars or the Moon using local materials, providing habitats for human colonizers without needing to transport building materials from Earth. Fungi's ability to survive radiation and vacuum makes them candidates for space applications. So what have we learned? Mushrooms are far more than the simple organisms they appear to be. They're ancient, diverse, and essential parts of nearly every ecosystem on Earth. They've shaped our planet's history, influenced human civilization, and continue to offer solutions to modern problems. They're strange, beautiful, dangerous, delicious, and endlessly fascinating. The next time you see a mushroom, remember that you're looking at just the tip of an enormous organism, connected to a hidden world beneath your feet that's working quietly to sustain life on Earth. And that brings us to some of the stranger facts about mushrooms that seem almost too bizarre to be true. Some mushrooms can actually move. Well, not the mushroom itself, but the spores can propel themselves using tiny droplets of water. The spores absorb moisture from the air until a droplet forms on their surface. When the droplet reaches a certain size, it suddenly coalesces with the spore, releasing energy that launches the spore away from the mushroom. This mechanism, called Buller's drop, was only recently understood in detail. Have you considered how mushrooms know which way is up? They need to orient their caps properly to release spores effectively. Mushrooms can sense gravity and adjust their growth accordingly. If you knock over a mushroom that's still growing, it will actually bend its stem to reorient the cap horizontally. The mechanism involves sensing the pull of gravity on dense particles inside the fungal cells, similar to how our inner ears detect our orientation. The relationship between mushrooms and water is fascinating. Fresh mushrooms are about 90% water by weight, which explains why they shrink so much when cooked or dried. But fungi have complex relationships with moisture. Some species only fruit after specific rainfall patterns. Others emerge during foggy conditions, when humidity is high, but there's no rain. Desert mushrooms have evolved to fruit incredibly quickly after rare rain events, completing their entire reproductive cycle in just days before the soil dries out again. Mushrooms also respond to light, despite not being able to photosynthesize. Many species need light to fruit properly, and they can sense the direction of light to orient their growth. Some mushrooms even have day-night rhythms, growing more at certain times. The mechanisms behind these sensitivities are still being studied, but it's clear that fungi are much more sensitive to their environment than their stationary lifestyle might suggest. Temperature affects mushrooms in complex ways. Each species has an optimal temperature range for growth. Some mushrooms grow best in cool weather, while others prefer warmth. A few hardy species can fruit in near-freezing conditions, pushing up through snow. Others thrive in hot springs, growing in water over 140 degrees Fahrenheit. The enzyme systems in these thermophilic fungi have attracted attention from biotechnology companies because they remain functional at temperatures that would destroy most proteins. Speaking of extreme environments, some fungi have been found living inside rocks in the Antarctic dry valleys, one of the harshest environments on Earth. These cryptoendolithic fungi grow in the tiny pores of rocks, where they're somewhat protected from the extreme cold, dryness, and intense UV radiation. They grow incredibly slowly, sometimes taking decades to create visible growth. Scientists study these fungi as models for possible life on Mars, since the conditions are somewhat similar. The oldest parts of fungal organisms can be ancient. While mushroom-fruiting bodies only last days or weeks, the mycelium can persist for centuries or millennia. That Oregon honey fungus we keep mentioning is estimated to be between 12,400 and 8,650 years old, making it not just one of the largest, but also one of the oldest living organisms on Earth. Think about that. This organism was alive during the construction of the pyramids and has been growing continuously ever since. Fungi have different reproductive strategies. Some species are heterothallic, meaning they need two compatible individuals to reproduce sexually, similar to male and female animals. Others are homothallic and can reproduce sexually with themselves. Many fungi can also reproduce asexually through fragmentation or by producing asexual spores. This flexibility allows them to adapt to different conditions, reproducing sexually when conditions favor genetic diversity, and asexually when they just need to expand quickly. The genetics of fungi are bizarre by animal standards. Many fungi spend most of their life cycle as haploids, with only one copy of each chromosome, only briefly forming diploids during sexual reproduction. Some fungi have thousands of mating types instead of just two sexes. A mushroom might be able to mate with any individual except those of its own mating type, greatly increasing the chances of finding a compatible partner. In some species, there are over 20,000 different mating types. Even stranger, some fungi don't even determine sex at the level of the whole organism. Instead, individual cells within the same mycelium can have different mating types. The mycelium can be a mosaic of genetically different cells that have fused together, sharing resources while maintaining their genetic distinctiveness. This challenges our very concept of what an individual organism is. Fungi communicate through chemical signals. They release volatile organic compounds that can signal to other fungi or to plants and animals. Some of these compounds give mushrooms their distinctive smells. The pleasant earthy aroma of the forest floor after rain comes largely from compounds released by fungi and bacteria. Other compounds are warning signals or attractants. Plants can detect fungal chemical signals and respond by altering their growth or defenses. The mycelial network can transmit electrical signals similar to nerve impulses in animals. Researchers have detected rhythmic electrical activity in mycelium that changes in response to stimuli. When one part of a mycelial network is stimulated, electrical signals propagate through the network. The function of these signals isn't fully understood, but they may coordinate growth and resource allocation across the network. Some researchers have even speculated about fungal intelligence, though this remains highly controversial. Can fungi learn? Some experiments suggest they might have a rudimentary form of memory. Slime molds, which aren't true fungi but are often studied alongside them, can solve mazes and remember the locations of food sources. They can even anticipate periodic events, adjusting their behavior ahead of time. True fungi haven't been studied as extensively in this regard, but their ability to optimize network growth and resource distribution suggests some form of information processing is occurring. The impact of fungi on soil structure is profound. Mycelial networks physically bind soil particles together, preventing erosion. The sticky compounds fungi produce help create soil aggregates that improve water infiltration and retention. In many ecosystems, the mycelial network literally holds the soil together. When fungi are killed by pollution or poor land management, the soil structure deteriorates, increasing erosion and reducing fertility. Fungi are also crucial in the water cycle. Mycelial networks act like sponges, absorbing water when it's abundant and releasing it slowly during dry periods. This helps regulate water flow through ecosystems, reducing flooding during heavy rains and maintaining moisture during droughts. Forest soils rich in mycelium can hold much more water than soils lacking fungal networks. The carbon storage capacity of fungi is enormous. Mycelial networks store significant amounts of carbon underground, and their role in decomposition affects how much carbon is released back into the atmosphere versus how much is stored in soil. Mycorrhizal fungi move carbon from plants into the soil, where some of it can remain stored for long periods. Managing ecosystems to enhance fungal networks could be a strategy for capturing atmospheric carbon to mitigate climate change. Different types of forests have different dominant fungi. Coniferous forests are typically dominated by ectomycorrhizal fungi, which form sheaths around root tips. Tropical forests have more arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi, which penetrate into root cells. These differences affect how forests function and how they respond to environmental changes. Understanding these fungal communities is crucial for forest conservation and restoration efforts. When forests are cleared or disturbed, the fungal community suffers. Many mycorrhizal fungi are lost, and it can take decades for these communities to recover. This is one reason why old-growth forests are so valuable. They harbour diverse and complex fungal communities that develop over centuries. Young replanted forests may look healthy, above ground, but lack the fungal diversity of old-growth forests, making them less resilient to stress. Urban environments have their own fungal communities, often quite different from natural ecosystems. City parks, gardens, and even sidewalk cracks harbour fungi. Some species thrive in urban conditions, while others are rare or absent. Urban mushroom foraging has become popular, though foragers must be cautious because fungi can accumulate heavy metals and pollutants from contaminated soil. Mushrooms growing in polluted areas can be dangerous to eat, even if they're normally edible species. Fungi are very effective at accumulating heavy metals like lead, mercury, and cadmium. This property makes them useful for monitoring environmental contamination, but it also means that mushrooms from roadsides, industrial areas, or contaminated sites should never be consumed. However, this same property makes fungi valuable for bioremediation. They can be used to remove heavy metals from contaminated soil or water. Some species can accumulate metals in their fruiting bodies, which can then be harvested and disposed of safely, gradually cleaning the environment. This technique has been used in areas contaminated by mining, industrial processes, or radioactive materials. Fungi have been found growing on and breaking down surprising materials in recent years. There are fungi that can digest certain plastics, including polyurethane and polyethylene. While these processes are slow and not yet practical for large-scale plastic waste disposal, they offer hope for eventual biodegradation solutions. Researchers are working to identify the enzymes these fungi use and potentially engineer them for faster plastic degradation. Some fungi can break down synthetic dyes used in textile manufacturing, which are major water pollutants. Others can degrade pesticides and herbicides. This makes fungi potential tools for treating agricultural runoff and industrial wastewater. Several pilot projects are using fungal filtration systems to treat contaminated water before it enters natural water bodies. The wood decay process that fungi perform is more complex than simple decomposition. White rot fungi can selectively break down lignin while leaving cellulose relatively intact. Brown rot fungi do the opposite, consuming cellulose and leaving lignin behind. These different strategies create different types of decayed wood that various insects and other organisms depend on. Both types of decay are necessary for healthy forest ecosystems. Dead wood isn't really dead, it's full of life, mostly fungal. A rotting log is habitat for countless organisms, and the decomposition process can take decades. As the log decays, different fungi colonize it in succession, each adapted to the particular stage of decomposition. This succession creates a constantly changing habitat that supports tremendous biodiversity. Some animals have evolved specifically to eat fungi. Fungus gnats lay their eggs in mushrooms, and their larvae develop inside the fungal tissue. Some beetles bore into mushrooms to feed and reproduce. Slugs and snails are major mushroom consumers. Small mammals like squirrels and deer mice eat many mushrooms, including some species that are poisonous to humans, but apparently not to them. In fact, some animals may have evolved resistance to specific mushroom toxins. Deer and other large herbivores consume mushrooms as part of their diet. They seem to seek out certain species, possibly for nutritional benefits or medicinal properties. Some researchers believe animals may use fungi to self-medicate, consuming species with antiparasitic or antimicrobial properties when they're sick. This behavior, called zoopharmacognosy, has been observed in many species. Bears emerging from hibernation often consume large quantities of mushrooms. Some Native American traditions mention that mushrooms help bears purge parasites and prepare their digestive systems after their long winter fast. While this hasn't been scientifically confirmed, it's an intriguing possibility that highlights the complex relationships between fungi and wildlife. Truffle hunting pigs and dogs are famous for their ability to sniff out these valuable underground fungi. Truffles produce strong-smelling compounds that attract animals to dig them up and eat them, dispersing the spores in their droppings. The compounds that make truffles smell appealing to pigs are similar to pig pheromones, which is why pigs are naturally attracted to them. Dogs can be trained to find truffles without eating them, making them more practical for commercial truffle hunting. The truffle industry is worth hundreds of millions of dollars annually, and the most expensive truffles can sell for thousands of dollars per pound. White truffles from Italy are especially prized, and attempts to cultivate them have had limited success. The complex relationship between truffles, their host trees, and the soil microbiome makes cultivation extremely difficult. Most truffles sold commercially are still wild harvested. Different cultures have different relationships with mushrooms. In many European countries, mushroom foraging is a beloved tradition, with families passing down knowledge of good foraging spots and identification tips through generations. In Russia and Eastern Europe, mushroom hunting is practically a national pastime, and many people spend autumn weekends in the forest collecting mushrooms to preserve for winter. In contrast, many English-speaking countries have historically been mycophobic, fearful and suspicious of mushrooms. This may stem from the difficulty of distinguishing edible from poisonous species and the potentially deadly consequences of mistakes. The British, in particular, have traditionally avoided wild mushrooms, though this is changing as foraging becomes more popular. Asian cultures have generally been more mycophilic, embracing mushrooms as food and medicine. Traditional Chinese and Japanese cuisine features many mushroom species, and medicinal use of fungi is deeply embedded in these cultures. Korea, Japan, and China have sophisticated mushroom cultivation traditions stretching back centuries. The cultural significance of mushrooms extends to their use in naming and symbolism. The Japanese word for mushroom, kinoko, literally means child of trees. In Chinese, several mushrooms have names reflecting their perceived properties. Lingji means spirit plant and is considered the mushroom of immortality. In Western culture, the term mushroom may derive from the French mousseron, though the etymology is debated. Mushroom festivals celebrating local species and foraging culture occur worldwide. The annual Mushroom Festival in Telluride, Colorado, attracts thousands of visitors. European countries hold numerous regional mushroom celebrations. These events educate people about fungi while celebrating their culinary and ecological importance. The arts world has long been fascinated by mushrooms. Their strange forms and sudden appearance have inspired artists for centuries. Botanical illustrators have created beautiful detailed drawings of mushrooms. Contemporary artists use mushrooms as subjects or even as materials, growing mycelium into sculptures or using fungal pigments as paints. Mushrooms appear frequently in literature, from Alice's Adventures in Wonderland to more recent works. They're often associated with magic, transformation, or the boundary between the mundane and the extraordinary. This symbolic use reflects their real-world properties: rapid growth, peculiar forms, and psychoactive effects in some species. The future of mycology holds exciting possibilities. Advances in genetic engineering may allow us to enhance useful properties of fungi or create new varieties for specific purposes. We might engineer fungi that produce more of certain compounds, grow faster, or break down specific pollutants more efficiently. However, such developments would need careful consideration of potential ecological impacts. Fungi might also play a role in fighting climate change beyond carbon storage. Some researchers are exploring whether we can enhance the ability of mycorrhizal fungi to help plants capture and store carbon. Others are investigating whether fungi could help plants survive in increasingly challenging conditions as the climate changes. The study of fungal secondary metabolites, compounds fungi produce that aren't essential for their basic metabolism, continues to reveal new potential medicines and useful chemicals. Fungi produce these compounds for various reasons: to defend against competitors, attract dispersers, or regulate their own growth. For human purposes, they're a treasure trove of bioactive molecules. As antibiotic resistance increases, the search for new antimicrobial compounds has become urgent. Fungi, with their millions of species and countless unique compounds, represent a largely untapped resource. Researchers are using new techniques to search fungal genomes for genes that might produce useful compounds, speeding up the discovery process. The intersection of mycology and technology is creating new opportunities. Mycelium-based computers and sensors are being developed, taking advantage of the mycelial network's information processing capabilities. While still in early stages, this biocomputing approach could lead to new types of sustainable electronics. Fungi are being explored for their potential in producing biodegradable alternatives to petroleum-based products. Mycelium can be grown into foam-like materials that could replace packaging materials, insulation, or even soft furniture. These materials are completely biodegradable and can be grown from agricultural waste in a matter of days. Fashion designers are experimenting with mycelium leather, creating material that looks and feels like animal leather, but is grown rather than raised and slaughtered. Several companies are now producing commercial mycelium leather products. As the technology improves, these materials could become competitive with traditional leather in both quality and price. Even the music industry has been influenced by fungi. Some rare vintage violins are believed to have exceptional sound quality, partly because the wood was stored in conditions that allowed specific fungi to partially decompose it in ways that improved its acoustic properties. Researchers are now experimenting with deliberately treating wood with fungi to replicate this effect. The biomechanics of mushroom growth continue to fascinate researchers. The force generated by a growing mushroom can be substantial, enough to crack concrete or lift heavy objects. This force comes from water pressure inside the cells, which expands the preformed structure. Understanding these mechanisms could inspire new engineering solutions. Mushroom spore prints, made by placing a mushroom cap on paper and allowing spores to fall, create beautiful patterns and are important for identification. Each species produces spores of a characteristic color, from white to black, purple, brown, pink, or green. The patterns the spores make can be intricate and are sometimes framed as art. The diversity of mushroom shapes seems almost infinite. Beyond the typical umbrella shape, there are mushrooms shaped like shells, cups, balls, stars, fingers, brains, hooves, clubs, trumpets, and corals. Some resemble tiny bird nests, others look like jellyfish, and still others could be mistaken for flowers. This diversity reflects the many different strategies fungi have evolved for spore dispersal. Bioluminescent mushrooms produce their glow through a chemical reaction involving luciferin and the enzyme luciferase, similar to fireflies. The purpose of this bioluminescence isn't entirely clear. One hypothesis is that it attracts insects, which then carry spores to new locations. Another possibility is that it's simply a byproduct of the fungus's metabolism with no specific function. The phenomenon of mushrooms appearing in circles, those fairy rings we discussed, can be used to estimate the age of the fungal colony. Since the ring expands at a relatively constant rate, measuring the diameter and knowing the growth rate for that species allows calculation of the colony's age. Some fairy rings are estimated to be 700 years old or more. Mushrooms have been used as tinder for starting fires throughout human history. The amadou fungus, which grows on birch trees, has been processed for this purpose for thousands of years. When properly prepared, it catches sparks easily and smoulders slowly. Ötzi the Iceman, the 5,300-year-old mummified human found in the Alps, was carrying amadou fungus among his possessions. The same fungus has also been used to make hats, bags, and other items. When properly processed, amadou fungus can be made into a soft, felt-like material. In some European regions, this craft tradition continues, though it's now mostly for specialty items rather than practical use. Before synthetic dyes, mushrooms were important sources of colour for textile dyeing. Different species produce different colours: yellows, oranges, reds, purples, blues, greens, and browns. The colours are often more subtle and complex than synthetic dyes, and some are highly prized by craft dyers. The dyeing process is an art, as the colours obtained depend on the mushroom species, the fibre being dyed, and the mordants used. Mushroom paper is another traditional craft seeing renewed interest. The tough, fibrous texture of some mushrooms can be processed into a paper-like material. This paper is durable and has a unique texture and appearance. Contemporary artists are exploring these traditional techniques alongside modern paper-making methods. We're also learning that fungi play important roles in animal health that we hadn't appreciated. The gut microbiomes of many animals include fungi, not just bacteria. These fungi contribute to digestion, immune function, and overall health. Disruption of the fungal component of the microbiome may contribute to various health problems. Similarly, plants host diverse fungal communities, not just on their roots, but on all their surfaces. These endophytic and epiphytic fungi can protect plants from pathogens, help them resist insect attacks, and even influence their growth. Understanding and managing these fungal communities could improve crop health and reduce the need for pesticides. The study of fossil fungi has revealed their ancient history and evolution. Fossilized mycorrhizal associations have been found in some of the earliest land plant fossils, confirming that this partnership is ancient. Fossil spores and fungal structures have been found in rocks hundreds of millions of years old, providing windows into ancient ecosystems. Some researchers study fungi preserved in amber, where they've been trapped in tree resin and fossilized over millions of years. These specimens, sometimes perfectly preserved, show us what ancient fungi looked like and hint at their ecological roles. Fungi have been found in amber, dating back to the age of dinosaurs. The field of paleomycology, the study of ancient fungi, is helping us understand how fungi have evolved and how they've influenced the evolution of other organisms. For instance, the evolution of lignin-degrading fungi fundamentally changed forest ecosystems and the global carbon cycle. Understanding these past changes helps us predict how fungi might respond to current environmental changes. As our final thoughts on this journey through the world of mushrooms, consider this. These organisms that many people barely notice are fundamental to life on Earth. They're decomposers that recycle nutrients, partners that help plants grow, food sources for countless species, and producers of compounds that can heal or harm. They're ancient organisms that have survived mass extinctions and shaped the planet's ecosystems for hundreds of millions of years. Looking forward, fungi will likely play increasing roles in solving human challenges. From sustainable materials to new medicines, from pollution cleanup to climate change mitigation, fungi offer possibilities we're only beginning to explore. As we face environmental challenges in the coming decades, our relationship with fungi will be more important than ever. The more we learn about mushrooms and the fungi that produce them, the more we realize how much we still don't know. Each discovery leads to new questions. How sophisticated is the information processing in mycelial networks? What medical compounds are waiting to be discovered in unstudied species? How will fungal communities respond to climate change? And what will that mean for the ecosystems that depend on them? Perhaps most importantly, the study of fungi teaches us about connection. Nothing in nature exists in isolation. The trees in a forest are linked through fungal networks. Those networks connect to soil organisms, which affect water flow and nutrient cycling, which influences everything living in that ecosystem. Mushrooms remind us that life is not a collection of independent organisms, but a web of relationships, with fungi literally forming the threads that bind it together. So the next time you see mushrooms in your lawn, in the grocery store, or on a walk in the woods, take a moment to appreciate them. Remember that they're not just small odd-looking things, but the visible signs of vast underground networks. Remember that they're members of a kingdom that has been shaping our world for hundreds of millions of years, and will continue doing so long after we're gone. And remember that without fungi, our planet would be unrecognizable, buried under dead matter that never decomposed, lacking the soils that feed our forests and farms, missing the medicines that save lives. Mushrooms are, quite simply, essential. They're strange and wonderful, sometimes dangerous, often delicious, and always fascinating. They challenge our assumptions about what life can be and how organisms can interact. They remind us that there's an entire hidden world beneath our feet, working away in darkness to sustain the life we see in the light. And that's what makes mushrooms truly remarkable. Not any single fact about them, but the totality of what they are and what they do. They're proof that the most important things in nature are often the least obvious, that small things can have enormous impacts, and that there's always more to discover if we look closely enough. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of 101 facts about mushrooms. I hope you've gained a new appreciation for these incredible organisms and perhaps feel inspired to learn more about them. The kingdom of fungi is vast and full of wonders, and we've only scratched the surface. Until next time, keep looking down. You never know what fascinating fungi you might spot.